So I wanted to address a question that's floating out there in the world right now, which is why are you so upset with Sony when you're not upset with Valve, when you're not upset with GOG and the PC landscape? So why should we hold the consoles to a different set of the PC companies like Valve, Steam, GOG, and the others? And so I wanted to get into that. Now, if I'm a developer, and increasingly I am, and I want to make a game for the PlayStation, you know, I have to ask Sony for permission to do that, and Sony also has to get the ASRB to rate the game and everything. But, with respects because it's going to be for sale, it's not free and everything. Somebody's going to sell it, and with respects. This is happening. And so, Sony has to press those into disk. They have to put the custom wobble on the disk, build the hardware, make their hardware have, detection to try to prevent build, running thing. So they have to have this industrial scale hardware that makes the security that builds the security into the disk, so the system is able to recognize legitimate disk versus copied disk and everything. And they have to secure their systems as a first party. And then on top of everything else, they get a cut of what games I launch on their console and everything. And they are able to send objections and censor my game and all kinds of things to make it more family friendly in its orientation and everything, And censorship and all that other stuff is something that I have to contend with on their platforms and everything. And, so with respects, I have to cut them into a revenue sharing model to do it and everything. So they get a cut out of every sale in terms of royalties that I make on their platform, and then on top of everything else, Sony's able to say yes or no to greenlight things, and also give feedback to the third party studios and everything, and orders to go and make live service titles and all that other stuff and everything, and make it very hard for third parties to work with them because they're demanding certain things from us as third parties in order to maintain the relationship. There's a set of expectations that they are able to foist on me to offering things in their ecosystem and their wheelhouse, right? But that's not how anything works in the world of PC. The world of PC is unsubsidized hardware that people have not even asked for permission to own. They've just bought outright and brought to the table into the world of PCs and everything. And so this laptop, I didn't have to get licenses from anybody to own it, and everything. I could just buy it straight from Amazon's ecosystem and everything. And so my anger about this is that the PC landscape is so fundamentally alien and different to the way that things operate within, the console space. I don't have to cut anybody into, to launch a game on the PC. I don't have to cut anybody into a revenue sharing model. I can just make it myself and then start openly selling it into that world, completely without working with anybody else in a completely indie fashion. It might behoove me to cut Steam in and everything to work with them because it's much more discoverable that way. But, with respects, in that world, Steam doesn't ever, cut people's access to things off, especially after they've downloaded it. And then GOG, and everything is offering people the ability to download things regardless and everything. And, they can make copies of it in a very convenient fashion, back it up, put it on the cloud, do what they want with it, and otherwise, and everything. And so, the way that things work in the PC world, as a developer, like if I want to launch a game on this platform, I don't have to ask anybody for permission. I don't have to work with Sony or a first party in doing it, and I can approach Valve after the fact and after things are put forward, and they, for the most part, will not censor it, and they won't have the stringent requirements to launch a game on their system. They may make me put it in the adult category if it's got porn in it, and everything, and make me jump through those hoops to make it so that only 18 plus players can play it. But with respect, if the 18 plus players have their preferences set up to display that shit, they're able to get access to it if they so choose and everything, and if they want. And that's so fundamentally alien to the way that things work in the world of like consoles, because the platforms that are in that world, the first party platforms, censor the hell out of everything in order to maintain a family friendly brand image and everything. And they're trying to do that. They're trying, even though things are changing because so many of their gamers are now older and everything, and then they're fucking outright 40s and everything. But the platforms, with respects, the platforms suck in a way because there's a first party, and it's the same with Nintendo. If I want to launch a game on Nintendo's ecosystem because I think that that will give my game greater exposure, and there's more money to be made, I still have to cut Nintendo into a share of those profits, and then also I have to send my code to them when they press into their little cartridges, and also that they'll put in their online stores, and I have to be in back and forth communication with them and everything, and there's a relationship that exists between the two of us, and so this makes everything in these worlds operate in a fundamentally different fashion. Now, I mean, this means that Sony is in the position of being able to cut off your access to those digital purchases in a way that you will never be able to get them back, and restore them. You have no backup. Once they're gone within Sony's ecosystem. But within the ecosystem of the PC, you can make endless backups of it. When the company revokes it, so the fuck what? You've still got access to it. When the licensing deals change, you've backed it up 1,000 different ways, and there's nothing that they can do about it. And they, the licensing deal might have changed, but you still have access to it and everything. And it may be a digital purchase, but it was an actual purchase. It wasn't a purchase for a temporary access to this thing that can be revoked at the discretion of the company. So the concern that I have with respect to Sony and Sony's, all digital future is that that is a closed ecosystem, which is not how things work in the world of PC and everything, which is an open ecosystem. And that's a closed ecosystem that they have complete dictatorial control over. And so if licensing deals change, they will revoke they have the ability to revoke your access to content that you bought and paid for, just because licensing deals changed and they didn't want to pay, anything more to Studio Canal or whatever what game company that it was that, the licensing deals changed behind the scenes and everything. And there's no transparency. We don't really know what happened between those two. We just don't know, because they don't have to tell us. These are private business to business negotiations that they don't have to act and in a transparent fashion about. And so, with respects to all of this, the way that things work in the world of PC is alien, compared to the way that it works in terms of the consoles. A digital only purchase on a console is not really a purchase. It's a what you're buying is a temporary revocable license that the company can take away whenever they want. With PC, when you download from some of these storefronts, you are actually purchasing it. You're just purchasing it in the digital format, which means that you can put it on a USB, stick. You can burn a Blu-ray, back it up, upload it to the cloud, make endless copies of it and everything, and have access to it, in such a way that even if the licensing deals change, you still have access to it, and everything. And you can't do that on the consoles. The consoles are very locked down, proprietary, and everything, and they do everything they can to prevent you from being able to boot up backups and everything, because the problem with that is that the enabling backups also enables pirates. You know, if I can back up my disk and boot it on the PlayStation 6, nothing stops me from downloading an ISO from the internet and burning it to disk and then running it.